The morning air at the airport was sharp with excitement and noise, people rushing with luggage, the scent of coffee and perfume blending in the air, the constant announcements echoing through the terminal. Emily Parker, a woman in her early 50s with kind blue eyes and soft lines around them, stood by the window, clutching her boarding pass tightly. Her heart was racing, though she wouldn't admit it. She hadn't traveled in years, not since her husband passed away 5 years ago. For most of her life, Emily had been the reliable one, the mother, the helper, the friend who listened but rarely talked about herself. She had promised her late husband she'd see the world one day, but she never found the courage. This trip to Rome was her first big step toward that promise. She was proud but nervous, trying to quiet the voice inside that whispered, "You're doing this alone." She found a seat near the gate and tried to distract herself by flipping through a magazine. That's when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Emily Parker. "Is that really you?" She turned, surprised, and broke into a smile. Ethan Cooper. Standing there was Ethan, her best friend, Laura's son. She hadn't seen him in years, not since he graduated college. The tall, confident young man standing in front of her looked nothing like the shy teenager she remembered helping with school essays. He wore a fitted jacket, his hair was a little messy, and his eyes carried the easy calm of someone who'd grown into himself. "I can't believe it," Emily said with a laugh. "What are you doing here?" "I'm heading to Rome for a marketing conference," he said, smiling warmly. "You? Vacation. Finally." They both laughed at the coincidence. It felt good, familiar, but unexpected. He insisted on helping her with her carry-on, brushing off her polite refusals. "You always looked out for me when I was a kid," he said lightly. "Consider it payback." As they boarded, fate decided to play its quiet trick. They were seated side by side. Emily found it funny, almost comforting. It felt as if the universe wanted her to have company on this flight. Maybe even to remind her that she wasn't as alone as she thought. Once the plane lifted off, she glanced out the window, the clouds glowing pink in the sunrise. "I never get used to that," she murmured. Ethan smiled. "It's magic, ISNT. It." Their conversation began easily, drifting from small talk to laughter to memories of his mother. Laura, he shared how hectic his job had become, how living in the city sometimes felt lonely despite the constant noise. Emily listened quietly, her nurturing instincts waking up again. She always liked the way Ethan spoke, direct but thoughtful, the kind of person who didn't rush through words as ours passed. The plane settled into that late flight, calm, lights dimmed. Passengers sleeping, only the steady hum of engines filling the silence. Ethan leaned slightly toward her. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," she said, surprised by his sudden seriousness. "I used to have the biggest crush on you," he said with a quiet laugh. "When I was like 15, Emily blinked, stunned, then chuckled softly. "Oh, Ethan, that's sweet and completely unexpected." He grinned. "I know. Don't worry, I've grown up since then. But you were always so kind. You treated me like I mattered when most adults didn't." Her smile softened. "I just tried to be kind. You were a good kid." "Still trying to be," he said, his voice softer now. That line lingered between them. It wasn't flirtation, not really. It was sincerity wrapped in memory. For Emily, it sparked something gentle but powerful. It had been a long time since someone had looked at her like she was interesting. Most people now saw her as the widow or Laura's friend. But Ethan looked at her like a person, someone alive, with stories, laughter, and feelings still inside. When mild turbulence rocked the plane, Emily tensed, gripping the armrest. Ethan noticed instantly and placed his hand gently over hers. "Hey, it's okay," he said calmly. "Just a few bumps. Happens all the time." His tone, warm, steady, confident, somehow made her relax. She nodded, managing a shaky laugh. "I never get used to this part," he smiled. "Then I'll make sure you don't notice it." Started talking again. Funny travel stories, things from work, random jokes, anything to distract her. She laughed more than she expected to, grateful for his easy charm. Somewhere between the conversation and the hum of the engines, the tension melted away. Hours passed like minutes. They talked about life, regrets, dreams, the strange comfort of getting older and finally understanding yourself. Emily found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years. She told him how she'd lost her husband, how for a long time she'd felt guilty for wanting happiness again, how she sometimes felt invisible now that her children were grown and her life quiet. Ethan listened, his gaze steady and compassionate. "You're not invisible, Emily," he said softly. "You're one of those people who makes the world quieter just by being in it. That's rare." The words hit her deeper than she expected. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. "That's very kind of you to say," she managed. He shrugged lightly, though his tone remained sincere. "It's just the truth." The plane lights dimmed completely now, signaling night. Outside, stars stretched across the endless dark sky, and the cabin was wrapped in a hush. Emily tried to rest, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying their conversation. It wasn't that Ethan had said anything inappropriate. He hadn't. But there was something tender in the way he looked at her. Something that made her feel seen again in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing at one point. Ethan shifted in his seat and whispered, "Still awake?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, you too?" "Can't sleep," he admitted. "Too many thoughts." "Same," she said softly. They sat there for a long moment, side by side in silence. The world outside was endless, but in that small pocket of stillness, it felt like only the two of them existed. He glanced at her again, his voice quiet. "You know, sometimes the best things in life happen when you stop planning." She met his gaze. "That's true. Maybe that's what this trip is, my attempt at not planning everything for once." He smiled. "Then you're doing it right already." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I'll take your word for it." Finally, her eyes grew heavy and she drifted off. When she woke hours later, sunlight was pouring through the window. The announcement for landing echoed through the cabin. She blinked and turned to find Ethan already awake, watching the sunrise with an expression of calm contentment. "Morning," he said, smiling. "You slept through the last round of turbulence." "Progress." She laughed softly. "Maybe because I felt safe this time." The words slipped out before she could think. Ethan's smile deepened slightly. But he didn't respond. He didn't need to. When the plane touched down in Rome, Emily's heart fluttered again, part excitement, part something she couldn't quite name. Ethan helped her with her luggage, his hand brushing hers briefly. The warmth of that small touch lingered far longer than it should have. At the terminal, they paused before parting ways. "I guess this is goodbye for now," Emily said. "Maybe not for long," Ethan replied. His smile easy, but his tone meaningful. "We're both in the same city, after all." She smiled back. "Maybe we'll cross paths again." He nodded. "I'd like that." As she walked toward the taxi stand, Emily felt a strange mix of confusion and wonder. It wasn't love. She knew that. But it was something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. She climbed into a cab and looked out at the city unfolding before her. The ancient buildings, the sound of street music, the sunlight hitting stone, it all felt like a beginning. Maybe this trip would show her something about life she'd forgotten. Maybe, she thought, as the car pulled away. Sometimes the most unexpected people remind you who you are again. And as she turned to glance, one last time at the airport entrance, she saw Ethan standing by the glass doors, watching her go, smiling faintly as if he knew this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. The morning sun over Rome painted everything gold, narrow streets, cobblestones glistening after an early drizzle, and cafe tables already filled with people sipping espresso. Emily stood outside her small hotel, suitcase at her side, breathing in the scent of fresh bread and roasted coffee. For the first time in years, she felt free. No deadlines, no responsibilities, just her, a new city, and a quiet promise to herself that she would live again. But fate, as always, had its own plans. As she checked in and made her way through the lobby, she caught a familiar voice behind her. "Emily Parker, are we just destined to keep running into each other?" She turned, startled, but smiling. "Ethan, you again?" There he was, dressed casually in a navy shirt, looking as relaxed as she'd ever seen him. "Guess we're staying at the same hotel," he said, holding up his room card with a grin. She laughed, shaking her head. "Rome's a big city, Ethan. This is too much of a coincidence." "Or maybe not," he replied easily. "Maybe the universe wanted to make sure you had company." It was strange. Just yesterday they were strangers again, separated by years and circumstance. Now here they were, sharing the same hotel, the same breakfast buffet. The same unexpected connection that seemed to follow them like a quiet melody. Later that morning, they ended up at the same cafe. Ethan, having spotted her across the street, waved her over. "You can't have your first Italian breakfast alone," he said. "That's a crime." She joined him reluctantly at first, but as the waiter brought cappuccinos and warm croissants, the conversation flowed effortlessly again. He talked about his work conference, the projects he was leading, and how life in New York felt like an endless loop of meetings and takeout dinners. Emily shared stories about her late husband, not in sadness, but in quiet reflection, and about how she'd spent most of her adult life taking care of everyone else. "You sound like someone who forgot how to take care of herself," Ethan said softly. She looked at him for a moment, realizing how true that was. "Maybe," she admitted, "but I'm trying to change that now." He smiled. "Good, you deserve to." There was no flirting in his tone, just warmth, genuine and calm. But that warmth was disarming. It reminded Emily of a time when connection was simple, before loss had made her cautious. After breakfast, they walked through the narrow streets of Trastevere, the heart of Rome's charm. Children played soccer in small alleys. Street musicians filled the air with old Italian songs, and the scent of basil and garlic drifted from open kitchens. Emily felt light again. Laughing at Ethan's dry humor and the way he mispronounced Italian phrases with exaggerated confidence at one point. He stopped at a small shop window displaying handmade jewelry. "You should get something," he said. "Something that marks this trip." She hesitated. "Oh, I don't really need anything." He picked up a delicate silver bracelet and turned to her. "It's not about need. It's about remembering that you did something for yourself." His words lingered. She took the bracelet gently and smiled. "Then maybe I will." They spent the rest of the day exploring, visiting the Colosseum, tossing a coin into the Trevi Fountain, and sharing pizza at a small restaurant tucked between ivy-covered walls. It was the kind of day that filled the heart without effort. But later that evening, as the sky darkened and streetlights began to glow, Emily found herself growing thoughtful. As they walked back to the hotel, she finally asked, "Ethan, don't you find it strange? Us running into each other twice, spending the whole day together." He shrugged lightly, his tone calm but his eyes serious. "Maybe, but I'm not complaining." "Are you?" "No," she admitted quietly. Just ... surprised." They paused at the steps leading to the hotel entrance. The soft hum of Rome's nightlife surrounded them, scooters passing by, laughter from nearby bars, the distant sound of a violin playing in the street. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said, "You know, I was nervous about this trip. But running into you, it feels like it was supposed to happen." His voice wasn't romantic, it was sincere, thoughtful. Still, Emily felt a twinge of emotion. For years she had lived quietly, her world shrinking to routines and memories. But here was this young man, her best friend's son, reminding her what it felt like to be seen, to be appreciated not for what she did, but for who she was. They said goodnight. But sleep didn't come easily for Emily. Lying in bed, she kept replaying their day. The laughter, the ease, the comfort. It had been years since she'd felt so alive. She wasn't sure what this connection was, only that it was real and unexpected. The next morning, she went down to breakfast early, hoping to gather her thoughts. She was sipping her coffee when Ethan appeared, tray in hand. "You're up early," he said, smiling. "I couldn't sleep much," she admitted. "Jet lag or something on your mind?" "Maybe both." He sat down across from her, studying her for a moment. "You know, I used to think adults always had life figured out. But the older I get, the more I realize no one really does." We're all just figuring it out as we go." Emily smiled faintly. "That's the secret they don't tell you. Even in your 50s, you're still figuring things out." "Then maybe that's a good thing," he said. "Means we still have time to change things." After breakfast, Ethan invited her to join him for a short trip to Tivoli, a small town outside Rome famous for its gardens and waterfalls. She hesitated. Part of her thought it was better to create some distance, but his enthusiasm was contagious. "Come on," he said, smiling. "It'll be fun. Besides, I owe you one proper tour after dragging you through every pizza shop yesterday." She laughed. "Fine, but you're buying lunch." The train ride to Tivoli was quiet and scenic. Rolling hills, olive groves, and sunlight streaming through the window. Ethan sat beside her, occasionally pointing out sights. But mostly they just enjoyed the peaceful silence. When they reached the gardens, Emily was mesmerized. The fountains sparkled under the sun, and flowers in every shade of color framed the old stone paths. It felt timeless. She stopped by one of the terraces, looking over the valley. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "It really is." But when she turned, she found him watching her, not the view. His expression wasn't romantic, it was something gentler, almost reverent. She looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. They spent hours walking, talking about dreams and regrets. Emily spoke about her children, how proud she was, but also how strange it felt to be needed less. Ethan admitted he sometimes felt lost despite his success. That life in the city often felt shallow. "I think that's why I like being here," he said. "Everything feels slower, real." Emily nodded. "That's what I needed too, to remember what real feels like." By the time they returned to Rome, the sun was setting, and the city glowed in soft amber light. They walked through the quiet streets back to the hotel, both tired but content. At the entrance, Ethan stopped. "Hey, Emily," he said. "Thanks for today. It was ... good. Better than I expected." She smiled. "You make it sound like you expected me to be bad company." He laughed. "No, I just didn't expect to enjoy myself this much." They said goodnight, but as Emily walked to her room, she realized something had shifted. This wasn't about romance, not yet, maybe not ever. It was about two people at different points in life finding connection, comfort, and something neither of them had expected: peace. As she closed her door, Emily leaned against it for a moment, smiling to herself. The world suddenly felt wide again, full of color and warmth. Maybe this was what her husband had meant when he told her to keep living. Maybe it wasn't about moving on. Maybe it was about moving forward. And though she didn't know what the next few days in Rome would bring, one thing was certain: this unexpected reunion had already changed something deep inside her. Some connections, she thought, aren't accidents. They're quiet reminders that life still has surprises, and that sometimes the people who show up unexpectedly are the ones who remind you how much you're still capable of feeling. 2 days passed in Rome, and what started as coincidence now felt like fate. Emily and Ethan fell into an easy rhythm: breakfast at the same table, exploring new corners of the city each afternoon, and quiet conversations that stretched late into the evenings. Their connection had grown not through words of love, but through understanding, the kind that comes from shared laughter, silence, and the comfort of simply being seen. On the morning of their last full day, the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled over the city, and rain began to fall in soft sheets. Emily stood by her hotel window, watching people hurry under umbrellas. It felt like the city was slowing down, urging her to do the same. A gentle knock came at her door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. "They said it's going to rain all day," he said. "So I figured we could either sit here bored or go make some memories in it." She smiled, amused. "You want to walk in the rain?" "Why not?" He grinned. "We've done everything else." She hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her coat. "All right, Mr. Adventure, lead the way." They walked through the rain-soaked streets, shoes splashing in puddles, laughter echoing against the old walls. The tourists were gone, and Rome felt intimate, almost secret. They stopped under the arch of an old bridge near the Tiber River, sheltering for a moment. Water dripped from Ethan's hair and his shirt was damp. But he didn't seem to care. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Emily said, laughing softly. "Living." Ethan teased. Her smile faded into something more thoughtful. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Maybe I am." They stood there, the rain humming like distant music. For a while, neither spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. "You know, I never told you something," he began. "When I was younger, I used to visit your house with my mom. You'd always make tea and ask about school, and you treated me like I mattered. Back then, I didn't realize how rare that was. You always had this light around you." Emily's breath caught slightly. "I was just trying to be kind, Ethan." "I know," he said softly, "but it meant something to me. It still does." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw not the boy she once knew, but a man standing in front of her, mature, kind, and completely unguarded. Something in her heart shifted, slow and gentle, like a door opening that she didn't realize was closed. They continued walking until they reached a quiet cafe. Inside, they shook off their coats and the waiter brought them warm drinks. The windows fogged from the rain outside, turning the world beyond into a blur of gray and gold. Ethan leaned back, studying her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "Are you happy, Emily?" The question lingered in the air. She took a slow breath before answering. "I'm learning to be," she said honestly. "For a long time, I forgot what happiness looked like. I think I buried it under everything I lost. But being here, with you, it's reminded me that it's still possible." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's good. You deserve that." His sincerity made her chest tighten. There was no hidden meaning, no expectation, just care. But sometimes care itself is powerful enough to stir the heart. Later that afternoon, the rain slowed and they decided to visit one last place, Villa Borghese Gardens, a vast park filled with trees and quiet paths. The air was cool and fresh, the city shimmering in the distance. They walked side by side, talking about small things, favorite books, memories from childhood, dreams they hadn't chased yet. Emily found herself opening up more than she had in years. She spoke of her late husband, how kind he was, how much she missed his calm presence. "He used to say that love doesn't die," she said softly. "It just changes form." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "Maybe that's true. Maybe it becomes something we carry forward." She looked at him, touched by the maturity in his tone. "You're wise for someone your age," she said, trying to keep her tone light. He chuckled. "Or maybe I've just had good people to learn from." They stopped by a fountain surrounded by old statues. The setting sun broke through the clouds, turning the whetstone golden. Emily felt an ache in her chest. Not sadness, but something tender and alive. She realized that in just a few days, this trip had awakened a part of her that she thought was gone forever. As they prepared to leave, Ethan turned to her. "You know, I don't think I'll ever forget this trip," he said quietly. "Not because of Rome, but because of you." She tried to respond, but words failed her. The sincerity in his eyes left her momentarily speechless. Back at the hotel that night, Emily stood on her balcony, watching the city lights flicker. The hum of traffic and laughter below felt like a lullaby. Then she heard a soft knock. Ethan stood there, holding 2 glasses of wine. "I figured we should toast before we go our separate ways," he said. She smiled and let him in. They clinked glasses standing by the window. The air between them was filled with warmth, not romantic tension, but quiet understanding. "To new beginnings," Ethan said. "To unexpected friendships." She replied. He smiled, but his eyes held something deeper. "Emily, I know this might sound strange, but this week has meant more to me than I can explain. You've reminded me that connection doesn't care about age or circumstance. It's just ... real." She looked at him for a long moment. "And you've reminded me that life still has surprises," she said softly. They talked late into the night about their futures, their fears, their hopes. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Promise me something," he said. Don't go back to living small. You have too much life left for that. She smiled, her eyes glistening. I promise. The next morning, Emily woke early. The sky was pale pink and the city was just beginning to stir. She went downstairs, suitcase ready, but before she could check out, she found a small envelope at the front desk with her name on it. Inside was a note. Emily, thank you for reminding me that kindness and courage still exist in the world. If our paths cross again, I'll consider it fate one more time. Ethan. She pressed the note to her chest, a smile tugging at her lips. There was no sadness, no longing, just gratitude. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships aren't defined by time or romance, but by what they awaken in us. As the taxi drove her toward the airport, Emily looked out at the city one last time. She felt renewed not because of Ethan, but because of herself. She had rediscovered her laughter, her curiosity. Her heart when the plane took off, she closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for coincidences, for unexpected friendships, and for reminders that even in the later chapters of life, there's always room for something new. Back in New York. A few weeks later, Emily returned to her routines, but something inside her had changed. She smiled more easily now, said yes to small adventures, and even booked another trip for the following year. Every so often, she'd look at the silver bracelet she bought in Rome, the one Ethan had convinced her to get, and smile. Not because she missed him, but because she remembered what that trip had given her. A second chance at feeling alive. And somewhere across the city, Ethan probably carried the same memory. Two lives that crossed unexpectedly and left both hearts lighter. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories aren't about love that lasts forever. They're about love that arrives just long enough to remind us who we are.